This podcast is supported by World of Learning Conference and Exhibition. L&D professionals, you need to be at World of Learning, the leading L&D event happening this 7th and 8th of October at the NEC Birmingham, UK. An unrivaled opportunity to learn, discover, interact and network. Register for free today at learnevents.com. This podcast is supported by Synthesia. Training videos shouldn't take weeks to make. Synthesia lets you turn text into professional, multilingual training videos in minutes. It's fast, scalable, and so simple anyone can use it. You can write an email, you can make a video.
Hey there, my name is Alex, and I'll be guiding you through this training session.
70% of Fortune 100 companies use Synthesia to modernize onboarding, simplify compliance, and scale global training. Podcast listeners get an exclusive 30-day free trial. Go to synthesia.io/greatminds. Don't miss it. This offer won't last.
When I look at agents in an organization, to me, they're the nervous system. But the question right now in organizations that I've not seen anybody answer it is, who is the brain to that nervous system?
Welcome to The Learning Hack, a podcast about the people and technologies that are creating the future of learning. I'm John Helmer.
Now guess what?
Learning is cool. Learning is cool. Learning is cool. I'm learning.
Learning is fun.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge. Education.
Hi there. This episode is about systems. The systems we build, the systems we inherit, and the systems we rely on to deliver learning in a digital age. If we've learned one thing from the past 5 years, it's this. Learning professionals are no longer just course creators. You're system designers, whether you like it or not. AI has raised the stakes. Organizations want more automation, tighter integration, better data. But with this comes a growing risk that L&D will be bypassed. We don't want that, do we? To help make sense of this transition, I spoke to Niles-Hoffman. Hack facts.
Niles-Hoffman is a globally recognized learning strategist, data evangelist, and author of the 8 Levers of EdTech Transformation. With more than 20 years of experience in enterprise learning, Laurie has led digital learning initiatives for some of the world's largest organizations. Her new book distills lessons learned and mistakes made into a practical, hard-headed framework for L&D leaders navigating change, complexity, and the age of AI.
This was a great conversation. Laurie doesn't pull punches, and she doesn't do unnecessary jargon. She did a really interesting LinkedIn post recently, which was all full of L&D jabberwocky, and it made me laugh. What she does do is take an unflinching look at what's holding L&D back and offer tools to move forward. We talk data, ecosystems, skills taxonomies, change management, and yes, AI, but we also explore something deeper. What kind of system is L&D really a part of? What role should learning professionals play in shaping it? So, Laurie, it's a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, so it's great that we're finally together. Welcome to The Learning Hack.
It is absolutely wonderful to be here. I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller. Maybe that's how I position it. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast and on this episode. I'm a big fan.
Brilliant. And I'd like to talk mostly about your new book. It's called The 8 Levers of EdTech Transformation, a field guide to the new future-focused L&D. But first of all, could you give us your origin story? You described yourself as a learning strategist and data evangelist. What brought you into the world of learning tech, and how has your view of EdTech evolved over your career?
Well, it goes back quite a long time. I'm a woman of a certain age, so but I think it's worth noting that my first foray into learning was actually when I graduated from university. I decided to go teach English abroad, as a lot of students did. But I didn't I didn't go to, at the time it was Korea or Japan. I went to Poland, which is where my family lives. And I lived there, and I taught English and English literature for a couple of years. Long story short, came back not very wealthy from that excursion, and I needed a job. And so I was actually teaching high school during the day, and I was working at a call center for a bank at night. So I was doing these split shifts. And it was really during that time at the call center that I started to just be proactive about, hey, do we need a job aid here? Do we, need some information there? Keep in mind, this is a very long time ago. We were just going into, the internet. Systems were very juvenile there. But I was lucky that somebody saw something in me, and they encouraged me to apply at what was called the Institute for Learning for this particular bank. It was Banque de Montréal, or also known as BMO. And they had a whole campus dedicated to learning, and that was became my playground. Fast forward, time marched on. I was there at the time when learning management systems were introduced. They were introduced for compliance reasons, and I got to see the shift from compliance and managing those and implementing those over to how they started to evolve into more holistic upskilling and more detailed platforms. And up until now, what I do is I work with CLOs of a variety of companies in the enterprise space on their learning ecosystems. So not just the learning management system, but how they plug into talent, how they plug into HRIS, how data flows, how are we managing skills, and how are we really delivering exciting learning experiences. So my thinking has certainly evolved. If I remember the whole click next to continue anti-money laundering modules, or even CD-ROMs, remember those? We had those. Password protected, of course, very high security. But it's been quite an evolution.
And those are really interesting. And English literature's loss has been e-learning's gain. So you describe your book as a culmination of a lot of mistakes. That rings very true with me. What was the most pivotal mistake, or one single mistake or challenging experience, perhaps we should call it, that truly crystallized the need for a holistic framework for L&D leaders, in your view?
The big one for me, and I didn't just commit this sin once. I feel like I'm doing a confession. It was more than once, and. It really came down to, it was two learning projects where the leadership was trying to implement a new system, an EdTech system, with an intent to change culture. And what I learned from that is it was just incongruous. We were, at that point, it wasn't even a learning or EdTech implementation or transformation. It was really change management, and they were foisting upon an L&D team that wasn't prepared to do that. The messaging was all off. The system that they chose, or that I was told to implement in both cases, wasn't fit for purpose. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of mistakes. But if I really pinned it back on what was the source of it, was basically leadership saying, we need a culture change. We want people to be more digital. We want them to be more engaged online, and we want them to share knowledge across borders. Hey, let's do that on a learning platform, and learning can drive that. So the whole concept of what we were actually building as learning on there was fallen by the wayside. Stakeholder management, that went out the window right at the beginning. Data, that wasn't even a glimmer on the horizon in any of those cases. And of course, both of them failed. One of them, spectacularly, for compliance reasons, we had to give them a video that was 12 minutes and told them all the do's and don'ts of the platform, what they could and could not say. People were petrified by it. It just didn't work at all. So that's probably the real big one. But it did also make me re-examine and then proactively look at subsequent projects to say, wait, there are some fault lines here that I can see, and I'm running into this exact same scenarios. I've got to be a better way to deal with some of these things.
Yeah, so that's so interesting, because it makes me think of my kind of early days in Epic, and one of the consultants there saying to me, all learning is a change. So read about change management, because obviously I knew nothing about it at the time. Yeah. encountered those problems, did you know about the change management literature and which we all know those books?
For the second time, yes. The first time, no, because I didn't really know what I was encountering. I was still quite junior in my career, and I was also, at that point, very much so involved on the tech side of it, meaning getting the integrations working, how are we going to upload people's data? How do we make sure that there's cataloging and segmentation? Because we had people in Kuala Lumpur who couldn't see, they were a separate entity. They could not see people in Luxembourg. I mean, all these different things. That was where my brain was. But it made me look at the whole thing and say, this is not just a technical project if we want to do this right. And it's not even just a learning project. And so, yes, you need the change management. You need those principles to understand how change management actually happens to make these things actually operate at scale.
Do you think organizations now have more of a sense of change management and who that belongs to, and would they give it to someone else in the organization nowadays, or with that awareness, or would they still shove it on L&D or expect L&D to understand change management?
It will vary depending on the company and depending on the size. So I tend to work more with enterprise size companies. And one of the first questions I do ask, and by enterprise, I'm defining that really as like 50,000 or more employees, so with global footprints. And so when I go into those meetings and we start scoping, I do say, okay, a couple of key questions. Well, there are a number of them, but one of them is, do you have a change management department that specifically deals with change management, or a communications and change management? Is there a subset within your internal communications? Because first of all, I don't want to step on their toes. They are really good at what they do, and they know their audience. They've done all of that research, and they know their demographics and how that works. They also know the messaging of the company. They know the authenticity, and they are able to produce assets that L&D we could, but we'd have to learn. Like there's a gap, right? That we would have to accomplish, that we would have to close. So that said, I've certainly been involved in projects where they're like, fly on your own, and that's a bit of a nervous feeling. I will at that point reach out to change management consultants. I've read the literature. I've read the different formats and principles of it. And sometimes we can, with a bit of duct tape and paper clips, put something together. But it's not my favorite way of doing it, because I also think L&D already has a job. It's good for us to know about change management, but to have to implement that at scale, in addition to looking at a whole new platform or ecosystem, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Let's give listeners a flavour of the book now, if they hadn't read it. Many of them will already have read it by the time this comes out in a sec. But if you can give people an idea of the book, the main ideas it puts across, you've structured it around 8 levers. What are they, briefly, and how did you arrive at this 8 particularly?
The story I like to tell is I wrote this in the deep of winter here in Toronto, Canada. And it was myself on my laptop. And the first person I said, could you look at this manuscript, was my husband. And he looked through it, and his first comment was, you do know, Laurie, that you've titled the book 9 Levers and there are only 8. So I can't confess to being very diligent in my number. But I looked at him in horror, because at that point I'd already purchased the domain for 9levers.com, and I was ready to go. So fun fact, if you look at the inscription in the dedication in the book, it does thank my husband for astutely pointing out there are actually 8 and not 9 levers. So that's what happened there. But the 8 levers really was a culmination. I went through all of my notes from all of my transformations that I've done, at both as a consultant and internally. And I was just starting to see the same repeated themes over and over again. And I'm like, I need to put these together, because I can see what needs to change, and also too where the fault lines are and where people are going to run into traps if they're not thinking about this. The first, they're not in any particular order, because they really all need to be there in some way, shape, or form. But depending on the culture of your company, I'm not saying that you need to do everyone to the maximum, and that's the only way you're going to achieve success. There is cultural and also infrastructure nuances to it, but this is meant to give you a framework of things you should be thinking about and what you need to do. So it starts with a new target operating model. So operating with more of I put a lens on it as if you are an A&E department. You don't see people as they walk in. You see them according to severity and what resources you have. And you also have a morgue. We'll talk more potentially about the morgue later, where you say no to things. And so that operating model is very different to what a lot of enterprises get into, which is the annual plan. And the annual plan is great for things like compliance that we have to do, but it does run into barriers.
No, you talked about triage as a metaphor for this.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds great and, accords with what it's like running any department in an organization from my point of view, but it does sound a bit reactive.
It is. I would agree. It is reactive. And that's why the second piece to this that ties into it is data.
Okay.
Because if we're not using data, we are always going to be in the firefighter mode, or we're going to be chasing ambulances, which I don't want to do.
The A&E, accident and emergency mode, yeah.
Exactly. And that's not how we always want to operate. But when we use data, and I refer to in the book a number of places that you can go as an L&D leader to start getting predictive analytics and to get better about surfacing what is actually happening in your organization. That's how you really start to transform. And it's no longer about waiting for a business partner of a unit to come to you and say, we have this issue, can we do this? It's about looking at some of these dashboards in real time and being able to contact proactively and say, hey, we're seeing people are searching for a particular term, for example. We don't have content on that. Is that an issue for you? Do we need to do something? And kind of doing a very quick, performance consulting or having a conversation to see if this is a gap we need to, or, and this is another lever, but I'll get to that one. Do we push it out to internal communications? Is it something that we even don't need to touch? So, and data also starts to become really magical when we are looking at companies through a skills-based lens. And that is also one of the levers, because we can start getting predictive about what skills we need as an organization and closing those in advance rather than waiting for or chasing the situation, which by then it's way too late. So that's why the second lever is data.
Right. We've had quite a lot of talk about skills on the podcast, and Teresa Rose, who's specialist in that area, did a very good podcast interview about that. Are you happy with skills as something that you can kind of put a pin in and say, yes, this works, we get a skills taxonomy and it'll be all okay? I mean, there are various kind of opinions about it. Some people say it's too fuzzy and skills in one organization aren't like skills in another, and taxonomies are hard to come by. You need a folksonomy, yada, 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 yada.
I think you've touched on all of the major issues there with
problems.
Skills.
All right, okay, go home.
No. Yeah, we're done. Exactly. The thing with Skills, it's right for where we are right now. It is a way to capture some data, albeit fuzzy, which was better than what we had before. That's the way that I look at it. Do I believe as an organization there is value to having a skills taxonomy of 50,000 skills and mapping every person against that? Yeah. No. My work with companies, when I work with them on skills, and skills incidentally is it's the fourth lever. We jumped over number 3. I'll go back to that one after.
Sorry, content strategy.
Yeah, for right now, skills is a way to organize some of that data. And when I advise my clients, I'm like, let's pick 10 skills that your organization actually needs, that are in debt in your organization, that you have gaps on, and see how we work with those, rather than starting to just right away jump into this whole skills-based framework. Because the fact is, skills is just it's a unit. It's not the best unit. We've said it's fuzzy. I am very much so swayed towards having a task taxonomy. And task is, again, not a great word, but it's what people can do, and being able to measure that. The problem with that is that it is going to be organizationally specific. You could argue skills also are, but the direction of travel with a lot of these people tech systems, for better, for worse, is to have a universal or even just geographically specific skills taxonomy that everybody is measured against. And so people can migrate through different organizations, and that goes with them. It's a portable sort of CV that's more accurate. That's the vision. Okay.
Yeah. Let's not get into the into the detail of that. So let's backtrack and go to content strategy.
Certainly. So content strategy is a really interesting one right now, because the way that it's evolving is content is no longer going to be, as I see it, that static course that we build, that is the click next to continue. Instead, it's going to be something that is derivative of multiple sources, that is probably introducing a framework combined with innate business knowledge, combined with personalization that we know about a person, and as well as an AI coach that has SOP, or it's been trained to deliver really good learning experiences. Now, all those things sound wonderful. We're not fully there yet. I mean, even if you look at the study mode that OpenAI has been, teasing, it's some things are adequate, but it uses a Socratic method. There's things that, yes, no, maybe. So we're still feeling this out. Where my stance is on this is that just building that static course is probably not going to be our future. And my hope is that we are going to be using tools, or I'm already working with tools that are plugged into not only these systems where people are operating to get that personalization and context, but they're also looking at impact. And so we can start looking at the learning to see what is actually working. So we will actually start to get some data around what is, possible within an organization, what does lead to success, what does not. Now, I will also concede those are going to be very fuzzy metrics too. Did a person, pass this because they, took the module, or is because they had a great manager? We're not going to have all of that, but I think it's going to get us closer to starting to I call it closed loop reporting, where we're starting to, in moments, being able to look at what has impact and then reverse engineering some of the learning process. That's my hope. Whether we get there and whether even this hypothesis is correct, still it's going to stand the test of time. But where I will put a line in the sand definitively is say, unless it's compliance and there's legal reasons, I don't think the static course that is a sheep dip that everybody goes through will be, I think it will become a relic.
Yeah, we do hear this a lot. And the vision, I think everybody shares or at least gives lip service to in some cases, is AI comes in and we have kind of ultra-personalized stuff, courses, content created on the fly, according to data and so on. Last time I looked, Go One is still in business.
Exactly.
So we're on a journey.
If you're looking to connect with the top minds in learning and talent, there's no better place than an iVentiv event. That's IVENTIV. Since 2009, they've hosted nearly 300 interactive conversational events exclusively for senior leaders like global heads of learning. I've been a sponsor myself and found these events invaluable. Less about sitting and listening, more about real, impactful conversations. It's an unmatched opportunity to collaborate with leading chief learning officers on the challenges they're tackling today. Join the conversation. Visit iventiv.com/learning-hack. That's iventiv.com/learning-hack.
Stakeholder management, number 5.
Okay, this is the chapter I'll hold up my hands and say I'm the worst at. So I'm not particularly good at it. I really had to sit down and also get feedback from people I'd worked with before, things that worked well. Where were some of my blind spots to really put this forward? Because it's really not about me, but it's about what does actually work in stakeholder management. So this is a list of tips and tricks to help people, because the challenge with learning is that everybody's been touched by learning in some way. Whether you have gone to school, whether you've gone to higher education, whether you've been homeschooled or taken a course online, whatever you've done learning with a capital L at some point. And so everyone has an opinion on what is good learning, and there's a lot of biases in that. And there's also learning is emotional, and people bring that into the learning conversation in the sense of people have an opinion about it or a feeling about it. You would never see a CFO go to a chief product officer and say, you know what, like, I think we should vibe code all this, and I know why. That's probably not going to happen. But when we talk to stakeholders, we get involved in those conversations where they're like, this was a great learning experience. And you're like, well, let's look at the data. Let's look at some of this. Let's look at some of that. And so it can be hard to break that down. So I feel for L&D professionals, being one myself, you're coming in at a disadvantage often when you have those conversations. And so it can be hard to break those things down. Hence why data is a lever, because data can really help in these conversations.
Yeah. It's difficult stuff, and it is about as much about people skills of the L&D people, really, in a way. Some people are great at organizations. They know how to do it really well. And some people not halfway.
That would be me.
Well, we're both freelancers, and there's a reason for that, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
So, knowledge management marketing. Now, I have to make a confession now, mea culpa. It's 50 years since my last confession. When you said, when I read at the beginning of the book, how you said your husband had pointed out that there are, in fact, only 8 levers, I got it the wrong way around. I assumed that he knew something about learning and said, no, you've got one there you don't really need. It should be 8 levers, or that 8 levers was neater, or you can make a nicer diagram with it. And so you lump together knowledge management and marketing. So my question about knowledge, which is terrible of me to make that assumption.
No.
But knowledge management and marketing, why do they go together?
Okay, so I'll talk to this. So the first one is, my husband's actually not in the learning development world at all. So he just has to listen to me rant and tune that out. So he's actually he works as a crisis communications consultant, and. Yeah, so which is very interesting, and he also sometimes also does now, he didn't at the time, but change management consulting. So you can see how things do dovetail.
Yes.
But why did I separate knowledge management and marketing? There were a few reasons. Marketing, I had pushed that rock uphill for a very long time about how marketers use data to run campaigns that are automated, and what the parallels are between, how marketing automation works to drive people to certain behaviors. Because when you think about the two, they're very similar from an overview perspective. You're trying to give somebody a piece of knowledge or information to change a behavior in marketing, and is in general what they're trying to do. I didn't put it out as a full lever because I've been playing with this for probably 12 years, and I'm just not seeing the uptake or that L&D really adopting this mindset. And I wanted to meet people where they're at. There are also very few tools that have the robustness that you are able to do in marketing. And especially now, if you think of how marketing's been impacted by AI, now everything is just completely like basically they know everything about you, and they're able to filter that back into understanding your needs. I mean, OpenAI announced a partnership with Shopify. So, now it'll know all of the crazy questions and things I talk to AI about when I use it as my therapist or something, and it can now suggest products to me potentially, and with a buy here button. So park that to the side. But I wanted to also not ignore marketing, but I see marketing as more of a branch within the business that we could learn from, akin to knowledge management. There are places where there is good practice on how to communicate internally and how knowledge is stored and how we understand our audiences. But I felt that for this as a lever, they could be lumped in together. Now, that said, I love the work of Bianca Bauman and Mike Taylor and her latest book, Think Like a Marketer, Train Like an L&D Pro. Fun fact, I hired her on my team. I'm not going to say how many years ago, because then it really says I'm a woman of a certain age. When we worked at a company called Eloqua, which at the time was a forerunner in marketing automation, and eventually went to IPO and got acquired by Oracle. So she's really distilled a lot of that thinking and how you can do a lot of the things that were there. So I also knew her book was coming out, and I refer people onto her because I see that she's just got a whole domain of expertise in that. So that was why marketing and knowledge management came together. But as for knowledge management, and I will accept hate mail at Lori@8levers.com, I think companies are going to start deciding, do they have an L&D department or do they have knowledge management, depending on how they're using or implementing a really savvy or sophisticated AI coach or study, robot or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because knowledge management is housing all of the IP history. It's the brain, it's the memory of the company. And if you're pulling from that, that's where you're getting probably a lot of your best practices. Does it mean that you need, do you need to understand, some methodology if you have proven success and efficacy, maybe in something that deviates from that methodology, but works internally with your customers and with your ICP. So I think companies will have to start making some decisions about that. Or at the very least, combining when we talk about personalization, this comes down to data and everything else, is combining knowledge management with the infrastructure or the scaffolding of things like methodologies and procedures that we would see maybe in an L&D traditional content library to create that bespoke experience. That was a long-winded way of telling that.
It's good. And as we're getting through these, this is making me think these are all areas, that have I come across again and again in L&D, and knowledge management a lot, and marketing. I'm a marketing person. I've done crisis management before, so that kind of throws you back to the triage method as well.
Yes.
But we have to move on, so I'm kind of biting my lip rather than kind of opining about marketing and learning here. I should say, I think my second podcast ever back in 2019 was called Don't Think Like a Marketer.
Interesting. I had not heard that one. I will go back.
Ages ago, but with Charles Clemens from
Yes.
who you'll know well. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think the idea was that marketing is a lot. L&D people can learn a lot from marketers, but marketers are basically fundamentally evil, and training people are good. So stay away from those.
I would agree. I would agree with a lot of that. I mean, let's face it, marketers are trying to trick you into buying something or engaging with a product.
Yeah, they've done their job. If they can sell you something, it doesn't matter if it's a lifelong addiction or whatever. Moving on, ecosystems thinking. Now, that is making me think of Danny Johnson at Red Tray. Is that an influence on this?
Definitely. And I'm a huge fan of Danny Johnson and the crew at Red Thread. I think they are absolutely brilliant. The concept with ecosystems thinking is, it used to be that, again, I'm old. I remember the LMS stood on its own, and I would get every day or every Monday an Excel spreadsheet from HR that would tell me all the deltas, who was on leave, who had changed jobs, and I would have to manually put that all into Plateau, I think was the platform I was using at the time. So that's even another year marker on that. So then we saw the LMS or the learning platform, because I don't see a lot of difference between an LMS and an LXP, but it gets plugged into the HRIS, so that data starts to flow. So that's a first ecosystem where we have that relationship happening. But now that ecosystem is growing larger and more complex, and I really believe it has to, because we're seeing other adjacent themes and areas where if we want learning to be successful, we have to integrate them into what we're doing. So one, for example, example would be a talent marketplace. That's a place where we need to fill it with data about our people so the talent marketplace understands what skills people have or have newly acquired or have adjacent skills in. And then the talent marketplace can nudge them towards different, say a 6-week or different projects to be able to really hone those skills and work with a coach. This is no different to anything we were talking about before. If you want to go 70-20-10, or we know that you need the practice component, the application. This is just how it now can happen within organizations and how we get the data to flow so that we capture what people are doing and we can actually feed that back into either an HRIS or a skills intelligence technology. So that's one aspect of it. There's also, and I have thoughts on how good or bad these are in terms of society, but there's skills inference platforms and solutions which are looking at how you work, and they're able to say analyze how you write your emails or work on Slack or any of those other tools to say where you might have areas of improvement. Or, hey, Lori, you really do not know how to do a pivot table to save your life in Excel. So we've seen you try and do it, and it was a massacre. So here's a piece of learning on that and sort that out. Although now I would just chuck it into AI and say, hey, can you do that for me? But so that's another place. Then we're also looking at some of these, skills, and this all again hinges on skills. If you're looking at that as a piece of data, as the spine of the organization, it's basically how those flow through. So we see, different tools that are now saying, hey, I want to work on this project, or we need to build this project. What skills would a team need? How many people with particular skills? Do I have them in my wallet, or do I need to upskill? And you can see how then that would get pushed to learning to say, hey, we actually need 3 people. We've identified these 10 potentially who have adjacent skills. What are we going to do from a learning perspective, and what would the timing be? So it's almost a supply chain management. Again, I'm using the word skills. If I'm working with clients, we sometimes just call them things because it's whatever the client needs them to be, which is a very, very scientific term. But it's how these things all fit together.
Just to interrupt there, I think if you don't actually have any real science, you shouldn't just give labels and then pretend it is. And I see a lot of that in the industry, and I think a certain amount of it around skills is that it's not necessarily scientific, but people feel it. They know that their employees have things that they have to do, things they do regularly, things they're good at, aptitudes, attributes, personality attributes, and so on. And we need a way to calibrate all that. And if it's rough and ready but it works, then okay. Sorry, interrupted you.
No, it's a really astute point. I get nervous when I walk into an engagement and the conversation is around what is a skill, what is a competency, what is a behavior, and I just think this is not going to mean anything to the end user.
And there goes the next 3/4 of an hour.
Exactly, or even longer, and that's when I know we're in trouble. So the ecosystems thinking is just to really, we always talk about we want a seat at the table, be involved in the business. This is the way we are plugged into the business. It's also understanding things like a CRM, like a customer relationship management system. It's about understanding some of the project management software that yields a lot of data that we can be plugged into, and those are the ways too that if we're getting agentic in our thinking and our operations, those are going to be key to how L&D will actually operate. You may not even performance consult. There will be an agent that scans for things that you've taught it to scan for and highlight things to you, and maybe even go into the module with a human in the loop to make that change. When I say module, I mean more the RAG, the source of content. And then that becomes part of a personalized learning experience. So there's so many things happening. So we cannot simply think in terms of just what we do on the learning system. We have to be part of that broader system. That said, some of them scare me, like the Microsoft suite with skills inference. Are employees really aware that they're being monitored at every step and it's feeding in a skills taxonomy? And is it sophisticated enough to make decisions about who might be ready for the next challenge or internal mobility opportunity? like we're playing with people's lives and progress. And is it taking into account the full picture? Maybe I couldn't do that pivot table because at the same time I was on in a meeting and I was just trying to do this on the side. Like there's a number of factors.
I'd like to get into a bit more into that a bit later.
Sure.
But let's just finish off the 8 levers and get to strategic alignment with the business.
This is a no-brainer. It was just like, I have to put it in the book. If you're not thinking about the business, 3 ways, how does this help the business make money, save money, or mitigate risk? You're sunk, right? And it really was a basic one, but it's one that gets forgotten. I see a lot of learning strategies that simply say this is how many hours we're going to do and how many courses and that. And we all know you can't think like that. So I don't think there's anyone who would be surprised by this lever, but I tried to implement concrete ways that you can understand the business and make sure that you are aligned in the absence of data, or maybe even in absence of having a seat at the C-suite table. That's
the 8 levers. Along the way in the book, you identify a lot of dissatisfactions with L&D as it currently is. The need to be more aligned with the business, too caught up in spray and pray models of content provision, don't evaluate enough, etc. And I have to say, being a podcast interviewer of a certain age, not only are these very familiar, but we've been hearing them for a long time. What do you think it is that stops people making the changes that people like you, Laura Overton, Nigel Payne, and many others you'll know who've been recommending this for so long? Is it something about the people who are drawn to L&D? And there are commentators I know who like to kind of wail on L&D and what terrible people they are. And, I'm not one of those because I talk to a lot of them. I know how hard a job it is. Or is it something systemic in organizations and their attitude to training? Is it something about the way that learning fits into in most cases, commercial organization or government institution that brings about this kind of inability for people to do that job in the way that we think would be ideal?
Lots to unpack there. And I think it depends, if you wanted to say like to what level each of those things that you identified applies, it will be individual to every organization. But I think everything you mentioned there to some degree is a source, or is a root cause of where we are. One of the big ones I find is simply there's a lack of understanding and appreciation for what learning can do for a business from the C-suite. We launched the wrong way. We launched when we had an opportunity to transform, we launched with the LMS that was for compliance. And so there became an attitude that it doesn't need to be good, but it needs to, CYA cover us to, from legal. And it needs to do all the versioning, and it needs to control, and it needs to do all of those sign-offs and all those things. So we started off on the wrong foot, like right from the get-go, but we invested in these big systems, and there was a huge feeling there. So a lot of companies weren't expecting much from learning in terms of what it could deliver to, increase revenue, or, it was really mitigate risk. They're like, if I don't have it and I don't prove this, I can get fined. There we go. That's what it is. So that's going way, way back. I think the second reason is we haven't used data. And data to me is something that it's very hard to work with. It's very hard to do it right. We don't always have the resources in L&D for data. And I do have sympathy, although I was talking to Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and we had a little bit of a debate. I said I have sympathy for the average L&D professional who not only needs to know everything to know about learning, but they possibly need to know how to be an expert in a rapid authoring tool. They need to know how to manage stakeholders and talk to the business. And now we're saying you actually need to be a data analyst. Like, it's just, and for the paltry salary of whatever pounds per year. I mean, let's be realistic about this. And there's often not capacity, and teams are often not built to do anything with the data when they see things that don't work. So I think that is also another area, although we are now seeing systems that are closer. And I talked about that with ecosystems thinking and how content is going to change, that we're plugged into a lot more of these systems to get that closed loop reporting. So hopefully that nudges the us over the line. I do also think too that there are a lot of people who go into L&D with a passion for learning, and I respect that. I admire that, and I love that. But not necessarily with a business acumen and thinking about it from a business. And because that feels very icky to say, like, I love learning and I want to be here to help people, and it's very altruistic. Learning is also a science, and we do have to look at it through a harsh business lens. We can't say yes to everything. We also have to advocate for the learner, who everything we build, they have to consume. And just because it looks cool or it's we talk about the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire games or Jeopardy or escape rooms or any of those sorts of things. And, they win engagement awards and whatnot. Well, what are they actually doing, to the learner? And I suppose that also too is about the data conversation. Finally, I also think that, there are really, really good L&D leaders, and I admire them, and I learn from them and respect them, and I love working with them. There is also a set, and I'm sad to admit, where this is sort of their last tour of duty through HR. I've done Comp and Ben, I've done talent management, strategic workforce planning, and now I'm going to do L&D. Yeah. And I see that a lot, and I think, it's a missed opportunity. I've seen this happen in incredibly large organizations where it's somebody who really, really liked learning, and that's great. And that can hold back an entire company. I think my other thing that I would say is I would also point to some of the tech that we've had is outdated. If you compare ed tech to what is available out there, if you really want to do some of these sophisticated things at scale, you really have to do some fancy footwork because the systems hinder us. Not saying it's impossible, but if you're a really resource-strapped L&D team, is that going to be your priority necessarily, or are you going to keep your stakeholders happy? Yeah. This is why I didn't do well in an organization, because I probably would have opted not to keep the stakeholders happy.
On that last point, though, you're right. Some of that, some of the technology is a bit clunky. There's also, the type of technology that it is slightly clunky in this age, because we went through an age of lots of startups and point solutions, and then more and more monolithic systems coming on board, and bigger companies and roll-up acquisitions and so on. And so we have these kind of big monolithic systems, and it's like one ring to rule them all sort of thinking. But the ecosystems, the idea that you're talking about, is really the way technology is now. It's much more about, you may have a main platform, but you'll have plugins, something like video editing.
Yes.
I have a million plugins and audio editing and so on. And the machines have to talk to each other. You have things like Airtable, and it's all about integrations. And increasingly with agentic AI, it's about integrations. Some of the most powerful and influential tech companies now, people like Palantir, what they're really good at is integrations. It's something that we're not in a monolithic platform world anymore with tech. And if we want to take advantage of AI, the best, which is now full of innovative young startups, smaller companies again, that the market has kind of changed in shape as well. Then the edtech, the form of edtech perhaps has changed as well. I should write my own book, shouldn't I? Just don't have the attention span.
Absolutely. Although be careful, because I will tell you, I got a piece of anonymous email where I couldn't verify the sender because I'd made a post about and I've no financial attachments to this company. It was something I came across. Mindset.ai has found a way for it to scrape SCORM files, take the actual content out of SCORM files to be ingested within, to be included into a RAG or rapid retrieval augmentation generation, or it could be ingested to be partnered and into becoming a part of the body of work for a coach or anything like that. Anyway, that was a very long, convoluted message. But anyways, I posted about, hey, we're breaking out of SCORM. And the email that I got was a person basically warning me, saying that Adobe and Articulate and all these players in this space will never allow the death of SCORM, and that this is their play. And I'm thinking, am I going to be, found in Lake Ontario with an anvil around my waist that says click next to continue, chiseled into it?
Horrible vision.
Never to be seen again.
Yeah. Well, I sincerely hope not. And I'm going to shut up about technology now because you've cranked up my paranoia. So Let's talk a bit about the great inevitable, AI, with a sigh. Your concept of data-driven learning design, DDLD, predates the current AI revolution. How has the recent accelerations in AI awareness, with the LLMs and ChatGPT and so on, omnipresent, how's that transformed the possibilities for L&D, do you think? Allowing teams to achieve laser-focused precision in their learning initiatives, I think you say. What specifically does this look like in practice for an L&D team leveraging AI for data analysis and other stuff?
Basically, the concept of data-driven learning design doesn't change in what it was, which was basically like, okay, scan for insights before you start doing anything. Respond to those and then monitor and then continually scan for insights. Like it was a cyclical approach. So basically, you were looking for data within the organization from a variety of sources, and you're saying, okay, are those highlighting particular learning needs? Are they highlighting ways that learning content needs to be served up to people? What is it telling us? And then we design something to fit that paradigm, and then we monitor it to see, does it actually have the uptake or the results that we expected? And if not, we look again at the data and we keep
double loop learning. Arduous, yes.
There you go.
Great minds and learning hat on. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really that sophisticated, right? Like, I mean, and it's going back, like, I don't even remember the year that I wrote it, but I mean, I think it's well over a decade. I mean, that it came out. So it's infantile in what it is. But the principle of it, once we get into an AI world, and particularly an agentic, I think agentic is where it really starts to just get a whole bunch of petrol added onto the flames. But you can do this at scale and you can automate it. So before I was relying on data feeds that I had to look at and interpret myself and say, oh, and I'm looking at stupid stuff. What are people searching for is a very basic one, right? And, or how many people are dropping off on a particular video? Does it have to do, could I change the title or stupid stuff like that, which actually isn't stupid at the time, but they were basic things that we could ingest. That was all we had at that moment. Yeah. Now, when we think of data-driven learning design, I still love that iterative process and that refinement process, but we are able to do it, one, at scale. We are able to include a lot more data points than we could before. And we have the added advantage, which we talked about, of having personalized content, which we didn't have before. Before, we just had the static piece that we could play a little bit with to get a different result, but everyone was viewing that static piece. Now we can look at trends across, thousands of learners and what that looks like, and how do we reverse engineer back into that and think about how learning is actually happening. And I know there's a lot of learning scientists who are probably just ready to pounce. But we can test some of these learning theories that we thought.
The loop can be faster with AI. I mean, we're hearing this in science, that AI is helping them to do experiments which would take months. They can do it. It can be modeled very quickly with AI now and happen a lot quicker. I mean, obviously there is an inherent lag to anything that involves humans that kind of slows things down, but you can get your data back much quicker. The vision with AI-driven learning from pre-LLMs was all about not just that the course can be reconstituted for personalization, what you know about people, but that it can be reconstituted on the fly in a single page. The content can change depending on how that user interacts with it. Those interactions become not only bigger and faster, and richer, but faster.
Exactly. You've summed it up absolutely brilliantly. So there's a lot more there that we can do. And there's a lot of this too that we can automate. So it isn't always a human looking at the things and making a decision. We can train agents to say, these are the things I'm looking for. Now, there's a lot of mistakes that are going to be made. And there's a lot of things that are not going to go well. But I also think of that person on the other end, and that's always my North Star, and say, okay, can I let go of some of my thinking, and can I look at the data in this iterative process to make it even marginally better for that person who has to consume this, and to give them the opportunity to get the results to stay relevant within their industry or within their organization. I think that's where I'm hoping the potential of data-driven learning design, as it was as a little embryo or seed back in, whenever, when we now have more capabilities, we can actually see that through to fruition.
So to cap off the 8 levers, if I can reiterate them, the target operating model, data, content strategy, skills, stakeholder management, knowledge management, and marketing ecosystems thinking. Just as an aside, I try to be very honest about my use of AI on this podcast, and also the blunders that happen through relying too much on AI. And in the question sheet I sent you, I gave you a list of 8 levers that were completely wrong. They were completely different. And I'm going to blame Notebook L&amp for that, or ChatGPT, both of which were used in the research. I think we should be upfront about this. It's not always right, and we need to check it. Your job won't be taken by an AI. Your job will be taken by the person whose job it is to check the AI. Anyway, so of those 8 levers, where do you see organizations struggling most right now? Which one is the most problematical?
The most problematic for them right now is the skills one, because, and I'm going to point the finger at vendors, because they're saying it's so easy and this is just how it's going to be. And we talked about all the things that come around skills, and I don't think people are being really honest about it. So if they're not struggling with skills now, they could potentially in the future. I mean, we've all seen the Workday trial, the case where it's questioning the bias. And in Europe, you now have the mandate that your AI, when it comes to people development or hiring decisions, internal mobility, it has to be defensible. You need to be able to say this is how the decision was made and how it came to that conclusion, for better or for worse. This is where they're standing, and I worry that skills are creating artificial boundaries and barriers, particularly in that ecosystem, just because we've made them the spine to that all these things are going to hinge on. So there's definitely that one. I would say perennially too, data is always going to be the one that L&D has fallen down on, just because we haven't had as much exposure to it, and now it's coming to the forefront. That if you aren't data driven, then you're going to get questioned on it, and you need to know what's happening on these in these systems. But if I had to look at the whole 8 together, and I didn't deliberately include AI as a lever, which I could have done had I wanted to keep my investment in the 9levers.com, which I think I paid domain.com all of £8, but hey, it's mine. I didn't make AI that one because it feeds into every single one of them, and it's a thread that goes throughout. But I think the reckoning of what we will let go of in L&D and what we will have to become skilled in when it comes to particularly agentic AI, I think we're kind of good with what we think generative AI can do for us, but there's a whole other leap. That, I think, is where we're going to see really the heels dig in, and we're going to struggle more and more and more, because there will be some things that we just don't do as humans anymore, and there will be things that we let go of. I view that as opportunity. I know for others, and I am extremely sympathetic, who will view this as a threat.
You've got an interesting take on the question of AI ethics, I thought, and I was struck by the questions posed in this passage, and I'm going to quote you now. Will we create systems that rank humans against an endless global taxonomy of skills, constantly measuring and recalibrating their value to the workforce? Will employees be spoon-fed personalised job aids ad nauseum, their growth reduced to algorithmic nudges based on clicks, CV uploads and AI-coached interactions? This vision, a world where curiosity and self-directed learning are replaced by machine-driven optimization, feels less like progress and more like an upskilling dystopia. It terrifies me.
Wow. Hearing it back, it's a little shocking. Thanks, John.
Well, you wrote it.
I know I did. Just like, oh, wow. Yeah, that wasn't very optimistic.
Well, it's pretty good, isn't it? I think, sent a chill down my spine. So, the question it raises for me is one of L&D skills, which we were just talking about, because the difference between a data and skills system, the type of systems where we're beginning to envision and see a system that truly enables people and a system that just surveils and pigeonholes them in the chilling way you describe. For me, it's one of system design. I think you can design that system well so it helps people, and as you can with any system, and you can also design the opposite. And, we all see terrible, because we're engaging with more and more systems, we see examples of terrible systems designed all the time. We're moaning about you weren't moaning, I was moaning about the platform we record this podcast on, about the UX and the user design. But sort of the whole thrust of your book, it seems to me, in a way, or perhaps a kind of undernote in that symphony, is that learning professionals need to become experts in system design, and in fact their whole job will become systems design. To the extent you agree with that analysis, you might shoot it down and say it's rubbish. You're quite at liberty to do that. Does this mean a shift in the L&D skill set, or does it mean different people doing that job?
You summed it up very, very, very well, and I completely agree with that. That idea that we need to think in terms of systems, we need to think in terms of humans, but it will be less about. And I talk a little bit about the learning experience architect, and some people have different names for it, but we're all. I think Josh Cavalier calls it an engineer, or there's different terms that are going around for it. But I see that as being, you're no longer saying, okay, this is the course, this is the progression, but rather you're thinking in terms of triggers and pulleys within an organization that will be automated for a person. So it might be, okay, you've taken a level 4 Spanish on a learning management system. The trigger that the architect programs in is that now the next time you go into your email, it says, hey, would you like to change your language settings to Spanish, so that you're getting some of that that practice in it, or it might connect you with somebody who speaks Spanish. And then as you progress and we see how well you're communicating in Spanish on Slack, then it would say, hey, move that to the talent marketplace. And we would flag you for some practicum on there, and a coach that is maybe based in, Mexico or Colombia, depending. And so this is just a generic example. But if you think of how we're considering people development, it will be about driving those triggers and those pulleys to say what will happen within somebody's lifespan or skill span. It will really be about that seed to fruit journey, not focused on a course with practice and application. It will be about understanding context and application and coaching and feedback and orchestrating those with those triggers. That's what I see will happen. And again, it comes down to we need to think in terms of those systems and how they fit together.
Yeah. So, and you do sum up rather a chilling vision of a world, which is all about if that, then this type of logic. And you said it looks a bit Soviet to you, I think.
Well, I don't want to see that. That's what I think. I think we have to keep the human aspect in it, and we have to also think of, I'm going to use the dirty word, marketers, where they have dynamic campaigns. I mean, they run these things where it is looking at, it is an if-then statement, but there's more lassitude in it, in that it's also allowing for people to drop off or to fade away from certain things and to be more of their personal, get more of their personal behaviors embedded. That's where I'd like to see it go in its format. But I worry that it will just become that if then this is what you must do, and the company needs you to learn these skills because you are in this place, and we're going to feed these up to you, and every time you click closed, it's going to serve it up to you again, just in a different format, right?
Yes.
I don't want to see that happen.
In the crude way, yeah. But I mean, even if it happens in the good way, that there's plenty of room for kind of human intervention and judgment and correction and all the rest of it, still systems design becomes a really big, important part of it. is it really suited to the skill set of, sorry, I was using the skills word again. Is it suited to the skill set of the people we currently have in L&D, I think, or are we going to see it's just passed off to somebody else? I mean, I do have, I do know people who feel that L&D will be bypassed. Definitely. I don't necessarily think that's the case myself. And there are plenty of people who don't. But what do you think? Is it a matter of reskilling, or should people start looking at reapplying?
There will be reskilling, point blank, in whatever direction we go in. And people are already reskilling. I think for some, it is going to be a massive leap. And my other question, because it is a massive change in thinking, but for the really savvy or the L&D professional who understands the importance of how space learning works and how application and all those things feed into a learning experience, I think they will thrive in that environment, because they're essentially engineering that, and they're even engineering where the human interaction might take place. Like they could say, well, when this happens, we're going to trigger a conversation with your people manager. People manager gets a bespoke list of what you've been working on and where your areas of improvement are, and so there's ways that we can make it really, really human and impactful. And I think there will be a set of L&D professionals who will embrace that, to see it beyond just the course design or some of the things that they were doing before. But there is going to be a group that will struggle in this environment, that will find that this isn't where they want to be. The other question that keeps me awake at night is, so when I look at agents in an organization, to me, they're the nervous system. And I'm talking about agents that they're basically like a dumb intern that you've given a set of instructions to, and they behave on their own. I'm not talking about agentic, that's reasoning, and that's a whole other place that we're going to go. But the question right now in organizations that I've not seen anybody answer it, is who is the brain to that nervous system? And that, to me, is really going to dictate also where L&D goes. It's going to dictate where a lot of business units go and how they operate and what autonomy they have. Because the fact is, the way that we automate things is going to touch on other systems, and they're going to bump up against each other. And we have to have that all operating in a cohesive way. And then when we start having agents that reason, well, that's a whole other layer of chaos that can be unleashed on an organization. Right now, IT is taking over that brain part of it, but they don't have the business sense sometimes to really understand where the business is going. So they will have their own blind spots. Is there going to be at a time that brain looks at it and say, I can automate this just the same way that I automate any other system within my organization? There is definitely the potential for that, but I think that would be a disaster. I still think you're going to need L&D people who really understand L&D and people development to even work with those agents, to train those agents. There may even come a point where we not only train people, or I don't like the word training, but we not only work with people, but we also have a team of agents that we actually upskill, or, well, in that case, it would be train ourselves, where we're writing the standard operating procedures and we're testing them and we're making sure that they're doing the things that they want to do. So there's that's getting into a whole other level. So it's change. And I don't know where we're going to land on some of these things. But we're in a really interesting point in that we're actually driving a lot of this change. Like, when people need to learn about AI, they're coming to learning. They're coming to L&D. Whether or not we're answering the call is another question. But it's almost a meta look at what is happening more broadly as a society and what our contribution is to this. And I think if we keep, again, that North Star, that there's a person on the other end sitting wherever they are who is being thrown all of these things at them, and what they need to learn just to function. We have to take up that call, and I just don't think that can be right now just be fully automated.
Lastly, who else would you recommend that people follow if they want to know more about this? Who do you kind of listen to and rate? And do you have any book recommendations apart from that people should, of course, buy your own marvelous book?
Well, it's funny when people say, should I buy your book? I'm like, just go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. It's already ingested. It's there. Although, in fairness, you said with Notebook LM, it didn't pick up the 8 levers, which is funny because, but again, we know there are hallucinations. But yeah, it's all out there. And I for me, really, the book is less about people buying the book and more having a look at the 8 levers and seeing how they might be able to contextualize that. The person right now that, and I mentioned him previously, was Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and what he has been doing with agentic workflows and how he's rethinking L&D in this new space blows my mind. I'm really completely and utterly impressed by it, and have had a few conversations with him just to peel back the layers of that onion. So would highly recommend him. In terms of books, I already mentioned Bianca Bauman's one. Think Like a Marketer, which if you think marketing is dangerous, it might not be the book for you. But I assure you, she is a very diligent L&D professional. I always recommend, when people are saying, what should I read? Anything by Julie Dirksen, to me, to really just pull it down. Absolutely. Because no matter what we're doing, whether it's training an agent, whether it's, architecting, learning campaigns and learning triggers or any of these things, you need to know the fundamentals. And I find she just brings some really brilliant thinking that's easy to digest. That's who I always recommend.
Yeah, and she's been on the podcast, of course, before. And now you have, and I'm very glad that you did. Thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you. This was a wonderful experience, and I just enjoyed the conversation. Really great questions, too. I appreciate it, John.
Thanks.
That's all on the Learning Hack podcast for this time. Many thanks to our guest and to our sponsors. The Learning Hack is completely independent and transparently funded by sponsorship. It is produced by John Helmer and hosted by him and also me, Mariana, a Synthesia AI avatar. If you want to help others find us, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Until next time, stay curious, learning people.
Now I finally get it.
The Learning Hack podcast is supported by Learning News, the learning sector's newswire. Rob and his team are good friends of the podcast, and we really value the help and advice we've had from them, and they do a great job. For the very latest news from around the learning sector, for interviews with learning leaders, the latest from learning sector vendors and features on workplace learning, go to learningnews.com.